because you're creating those step fractures and you're not getting the flake travel that you want, you think that the solution is to put more pitch on it, hit it even harder, and actually then you're compounding the problem. So if you're not getting those flakes to travel, remember, actually try decreasing the pitch with indirect percussion. Hey folks, Ryan Gill here with Hunt Primitive. This video is entirely on indirect percussion sticks. So we're going to teach you how to properly use the indirect percussion stick, and we're going to give you some examples, also some things to look for, and the difference of when you should be using the big end, the big copper cap end, and then also the little fine bit end. So we're going to be bouncing around to a couple different pieces of rock, showing you working different shapes and different materials, so you kind of get an idea of what you're looking for. And before we get into that, I do want to tell you a little bit about the sticks here, because we have changed things up over the years. So it's solid oak, it's about 15 inches long, and we use an industrial grade epoxy to hold the copper bit in and the copper cap on. And some of the questions that we get about this are they strong enough, or how long do they last? I've been using this one a long time. You're going to get a lot of use out of it. Remember that knapping tools are all wearable, so it doesn't matter what tool it is, they all will wear out over time. That's to be expected, but you're going to get a lot of use out of this if you use it properly, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in this video. So of course, when you're doing big reduction work and you're really hitting this thing hard, you should always be using the copper cap end. And those square edges really allow you to be precise, and you can hit this thing just about as hard as you want to hit it, and it's going to be perfectly fine. If you're lining up the little bit end and you are taking big massive swings, that's when you could possibly run into an issue of bending this or potentially even splitting it out. Now typically we don't have any issues with that. Once in a while one slips through the cracks and something's got a crack in it, gets sent out to a customer, and if for some reason that happens, just let us know. If you got it or whatever within a week and it broke, just send us an email, huntprimitive@gmail.com, and pretty much we'll just send you a new one out, because we want everybody to get them to be happy. But just keep that in mind. Don't overuse the small bit end. When you use this, as you see in the video, that when you have your platforms lined up, you don't need much of a hit at all, and you'll drive some really nice flakes. So when you want to use that hard indirect percussion, that's what this side's for, and then it'll last you for a very, very long time. And then speaking of wearing knapping tools out, typically the pressure flakers that we're running are about this size here, and these folks will tend to run through more so because they end up doing like a lot of grinding on the edge as opposed to just flake removal. And so we actually started to make a bigger version of it here that's got the same diameter copper tip as the indirect percussion flaker, and then this one's a little bit bigger, so you got some more leverage. And so this is going to put up with a lot more abuse, and it's also now included in our mastery kit, but you can pick these up individually as well. So if you're looking for that much more robust pressure flaker, we got you handled there now as well. So anyway, let's get on to the indirect percussion. The reason I also wanted to mention these was because you're going to see me prepping up platforms, and then I'll be using this heavier pressure flaker. But really, any pressure flaker you use is fine. We're just going to be setting up those platforms when it's time, so we can drive off really nice flakes with the thin bit end. Also, striking with just any sort of wood mallet, just a big old chunk of hickory from out in the yard is going to be just fine. You try to avoid using like your boppers and stuff on here. You don't want to put the metal on it, you just want wood on wood. So really, any sort of wood mallet you come up with is going to be perfectly fine. But anyway, we start off with the big end here, and we're going to work through actually bifacing this piece of obsidian. And more times than not, you'll see that I sit down and I'm actually going to lap knap this biface out, but because we're teaching indirect percussion, I just want to biface it solely with the indirect percussion stick. So at least you'll get some ideas on what to expect and the capabilities of indirect percussion. Now, the flakes that come off, they typically come off pretty darn quick, so you don't usually hit them and then slowly reveal those big long flakes. So if I've got one to show you, I may get you up close and show the long flake scar, and I might be able to catch some of it, but for the most part these things come off really, really fast and kind of dangerous. So I recommend, especially on this leg here, I recommend wearing long pants and a sock that pulls up, because you will end up sticking shards of rock into your leg. Obsidian, you don't have to take very big hits. You can tell it's nice, gentle, just pops like that. This is all wrist. You can't see my elbow in the video, but I'm not picking up and swinging this thing like a hammer. This is just wrist. It's just this. And so that, and I can change those angles to provide more platforms like that, okay? And I'll explain a little bit more about the angles in a second. Just kind of getting you used to seeing how hard I hit the obsidian. You see these flat edges? Okay, that's a difficult spot for a lot of people, and in the other videos we talk about the zigzag, or you're just going to zigzag the same way with this. What's also handy is you can be very precise and actually create new platforms by holding the piece of rock up. See what I'm saying here? And changing the angle of the platform itself. So you can get in here really precise with the indirect percussion and start changing. Instead of it being flat like this, see, now we've got a bevel on it. So remember, you're not always having to hit like this. Sometimes you can switch up the angles, really severe angles, just to change the angle of the platform. And then once you've got an angle that you think you can do something with, you can run a pretty good flake across there. So you can see there's a nice, pretty decent little thinning flake, runs out to about the top of this little mound. It's another pretty good one there. Pick that one up for you. It's not a huge one, but it's a good. See, now we're really starting to drive a lot nicer flakes. And again, it's just a little pop. You do not have to really beat this thing up. Once you set your platforms, you should be able to drive some really nice flakes without a ton of hitting. Okay, so we should be able to get a pretty decent one here. There we did. And just like working any sort of glass or whatever, just a reminder that once you hit, don't move your fingers around too much. Just come straight off of it, because if you start sliding them around, that's when you'll cut yourself on that really sharp glass edge. Wearing a glove on this hand, for a lot of folks, I recommend doing that. It's probably going to save you getting some cuts on the ends of your fingers. I do this all the time, so I am pretty well calloused up. And also there's a certain technique to it, but I even still get cut. So I do recommend, if you would like, to wear a glove, at least on the one hand, especially when working obsidian. Okay, there we go. Got another nice couple flakes off of that. So we're really taking out that big bulbous top just with the indirect percussion. We'll braid off a little bit and study it. That was a nice flake there. You can see how far that one ran. Okay, so this stuff works really, really well. And I think you got a pretty good handle on what you can accomplish on obsidian. So look at those nice flake scars. Just to clean up, because we got this dip down here, so all we're trying to do is take out this big hump turtleback looking area that was basically was the bulb of percussion on this obsidian spall. You can see how well that removes material on obsidian. Just go ahead and get this thing a little bit closer to a biface. So when you get good at it, you can actually pop along pretty darn fast. Gotta pull my sock up there and pull the pants down a little bit. I got a little shard stuck in my ankle. No big deal though. Alright. Alright, so we got this one about just not purely bifaced, but cleaned up enough that I should now be able to switch over to the small end so you can see how we can remove some flakes with it. Okay, so switch over here to the thin end just to give you a couple examples, and you're going to want to develop your platforms up a little bit better. And of course, we're not into a finished piece here per se, we're just giving some examples. So I want to make sure I really set those platforms up, which all that's explained a lot more in the Flint Knapping for Beginners video. So if you need those basics, I would recommend that video, which I always link that down in the description, or I put a picture of the thumbnail up on the screen. So if you need a refresher on any of that stuff, I recommend that video. Okay, and we'll use the thin end now just so you can see. You also notice that you've got a lot of variation that you can change, like even what we said, changing angles. You can put a lot of different pitch. So if you're not having a whole lot of luck with the indirect percussion, practice changing the angle in which you hit it. I would say always start when you're learning by keeping it flat or even pitch it up. And the reason is that's going to shorten your flakes. Okay, then once you start seeing how far your flakes go, then you can start putting a little downward pitch. But once you start getting this downward pitch, yes, you're going to be able to drive longer flakes, but you're also going to have a lot more step fractures because it's going to bite deep into the rock and then snap off. So I recommend at least getting started, put a little bit of up pitch on it, and then you'll get a visual on how far those flakes travel, and you'll be surprised that even with it level or even pitched up, you'll still run fairly long flakes, a lot longer than you think that you would. You wouldn't when you're doing direct percussion, you wouldn't be hitting at this angle because you would only get these little tiny chopped flakes. You know, that we talk about that in those videos as well, where I'm like, okay, chop the edge basically to strengthen the platform, and I always say to kind of lean the piece up a little bit because you're not going to run any long flakes. It's all you're going to do is take little short choppy flakes off. Well, that's not necessarily the truth with the indirect percussion because just how it clings on and it bites the rock. I can tip this up and I can still run a fairly long flake. That flake went in there just about an inch long, and you could see I was just about level on it. So again, if you're taking these big bites, that's when you're really stalling them out because you're really driving that flake so far into the center that you're not getting that long travel. So just try to decrease your pitch, there we go, with indirect percussion. So that one you can see there's a little piece stuck on my finger. And what that one did was we hit it here, if you can see it, and that little piece that was on my finger is actually down here. So we ran that whole ridge right there. We got another kind of a little bit of a ridge going on here, you can see. I know the obsidian's a little tougher to see with the sheen on it. We're going to go ahead and try to drive a couple flakes. There we go. So we ran that one actually right down where we wanted it to. It's another good one. Notice again, there's just little taps. If you're hitting, especially with obsidian, if you shouldn't have to hit obsidian any more than those little tiny wrist taps. So if you're hitting it too hard, then what it is you probably have too much of a bite. Like I said, you got too much downward pitch, and you're trying to drive through the center of this, and then that's also why your flakes are probably stalling out, and you think, well, I got to put more pitch on it because I'm not getting because you're creating those step fractures, and you're not getting the flake travel that you want. You think that the solution is to put more pitch on it, hit it even harder, and actually then you're compounding the problem. So if you're not getting those flakes to travel, remember, actually try decreasing the pitch with indirect percussion. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in even closer, and then I'm going to show you some really up close looks on how I place the bit on the rock. Alright, so now I'll show you this at least a little more up close. So we're not going to be able to drive these ones real far just because we got a little bit of a dip, but we have to take these out anyway. So these are the platforms we're going to be working to try to remove some of this flake here. So I want to show you right where I put that on. Okay, so it's not up really high. Okay, now if we were going to use the big end, okay, let's talk about that maybe first. If we were going to use the big end, then you have to put it on top. You don't necessarily put it up against the side. You do have to set it up on top, and then pop that off. So anytime you can use the big end, I would recommend it because it's going to save the wear and tear on the fine bit. So really all your bifacing work should be done with the big end. The little end is going to be perfect for grabbing those little platforms when you really need to drive that long flake. Okay, so now let's work on that. So let's just say we're going to try to drive a flake maybe over here. Actually looks good. Maybe not the most ideal spot ever, but see how that sits, not perfectly, not straight up against it. It does have to get up on top and just bite a little bit. So maybe a 1/16 of an inch at most. And then I'm going to be able to rock the piece around to decide the angle I want. Remember, this is actually too steep. So you're going to end up really step fracturing. Now you will see me take some hits like that. So I'm not going to say that I won't put some harder pitch on it. But remember, start probably flat to up a little bit until you get a little bit of a feel for it. Then pick up slightly. So you see the tension on that, right? That's going to help really lock that in, and then you can get the pitch where you want it. Lock it in. And then drive. See, that actually had a little bit too much pitch on it. You can see it step fractured right there. But I also had a little bit of a valley I was working into. But that's alright, because it did kind of clear us up to run some better ones probably this way now. There we go. See, that ran all the way down to here. So a nice long flake. Get that little bits of obsidian off. Okay, that one's pretty good. Alright, now we're going to use the indirect, because we're going to remove this whole area right here. You see how that's just kind of rounded up? So we're going to actually come in now with the little flaker, and we're going to remove some here to develop this larger platform. Very nice. Okay, and before we hit it, I want to really look at it, and then I'm going to even develop that platform just a little bit better with the pressure flaker. There we go. Okay, braid that back off. And I think what I'm actually going to do is switch back to the larger end. Let's see if we can get a good bite on this one. I don't know if we can or not. We sure did. Just knocked it right off that easy. Look, watch where my finger is. So we ran that whole, this whole flake from right here, right down that ridge that I was just talking about. Now we still have a little bit more on each side. So we'll go ahead and set those up and drive those off as well. But once you get the hang of indirect percussion, you're going to find that it is really precise and really handy. There we go. Watch where my finger is. There's a nice long one too. Nice, just right next to it. See how easy this stuff comes off, especially with obsidian. Love working this obsidian. And remember too, guys, you can get this stuff anywhere you want as long as you're out napping and having a good time. That's all that's really important to me. But if you do want to support us here at Hunt Primitive, you can pick up all the tools and the rock and everything you need right at huntprimitive.com. All right, well, I've shown you, I think, all that I really need to show you on this piece of obsidian. I might say I might get a little bit more, but we're actually getting pretty close to where we could just start working this into a point. But I want to show you at least on a different piece of rock. So I've got a biface here of kind of a gnarly piece of chert. I think it's a piece of Florida chert. And we're going to just work on, I want to kind of do a little bit of a test and see. Okay, it's pretty tough piece of rock. There we go. So you're going to notice on really tough rock, you're going to have to give it a couple good hits. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. You see how I'm going to change that angle again. If you take too big of a bite, that's when you break it, right? So I'm going to lift that angle, because it definitely, tool bites in a little bit better than you think it does. So again, because you can't really say it too much, if you're not getting the flake traveling that you're looking for, it might have more to do with the fact that you're putting too much angle in it, like you would for direct percussion. There's something also to be said about if you do change the angle and it's pretty steep, sometimes a light hit gets you what you need. It'll direct that energy kind of off to the side, off to the edge, where if you hit it really hard, you're trying to drive that shock wave right down through the center of the piece. That's when you'll end up breaking it. But funny enough, using indirect percussion, I break way less points. Like my break percentage goes way down when I use indirect percussion. And I use indirect percussion on every piece that I put together at this point, just because I can get stuff a lot thinner without having to worry about missing and hitting wrong with the direct percussion bopper. So I can be a lot more precise, and then I can drive those flakes even further. So here we go, let's set up and see if we can't drive. And that was a really good one. I think you can at least see the flake scar. Let's see, right there, bleeding a little bit, no big deal. So not really, piece of cortex kind of on here, and just ran that little flake through it just so easy. Oh, that's a good one too, right there. Just kind of knocking right through that crummy looking stuff. And you can still see I have to hit the chert a little bit harder, but I'm not taking any big cracks at this thing. Once your platforms are set up, you shouldn't have to hit it very hard at all. You get those platforms set up and it's like the rock almost wants to come off. Okay, so here we've got an arrowhead preform, and this one's not bad, but it is just a little chunky for me. It's close, but I think with a couple hits, just a couple hits with indirect percussion, we can take a couple of these little thicker spots out. Like you can see right here where I'm moving my finger on the bottom side. There's kind of that little piece there. I think what we'll do is we're gonna just slightly grind that platform We don't want to take a lot of material off, but we do want to definitely strengthen that platform a bit. Should work. And then I'm going to braid that. I'm not going to braid it crazy, but I definitely want to knock the loose stuff off. If you make that edge too strong, then that is where you're going to have kind of a problem getting those flakes to really travel. So now remember, this is that you're right on the edge and you're just kind of grabbing. Little tiny taps. Right there. Oops. Okay, you see that flake? That's that spot we were just talking about that I said there was that little turtle back, and that went actually just past center, so that would have been a little tougher to do with just pressure flaking. Now, possible, yes, indirect, but you're going to end up putting a lot of pressure and a lot of squeezing, and that's where I see a lot of times people are pushing like this, and then the whole piece snaps in half because they've got a tremendous amount of pressure on it, where this, it's just a nice little right there. Oh, missed that one too. That one just ran just about to center. Then this is just a little tap, and there's really no pressure put on the point. So the only way you're really going to break this is if you've got too steep of an angle and you hit it too hard. So we're just going to go through and whoop, perfect. Ooh, see if you can catch this one on my finger here. So I hit that tip, just wanting to thin that out a little bit. Okay, see that one come across? That's right at the tip. There's just a nice little gentle tap. Very nice. That one went just about an overshot right there. Let's see. Yep, right here. You can see it went, and it actually feathered out on the other side, so we were able to really take a nice little thinning flake out of that one. Okay. So it's like you can almost come along. There, we got another really good one. You can see this is that little flake that's underneath my finger. That tells you how far the flake actually traveled. It's like you could just kind of thin these arrowhead preforms out. Oh, that was really nice too. So once you get on a good streak, so let's see here if you can see the flake scars where we started. We had the 1 and then 2 and 3. You can see those flake scars, and that's really just thinning that out a lot nicer. So one pass with indirect percussion that's not a, it looks like a hinge that's on there. At least you can still see where it's clinging to, but there you go, you just popped it off. Just a little fingernail. And I think we'll do one more. Perfect. See if you can see all the flake scars on that now. I'll do what I can to show you. Really, really nice flake scars, and you can see how they went over and really thinned that piece out. So now I've got a little bit maybe on the other side. I'll take just a couple hits off there, but we're getting pretty thin now, which is good. There's one here in particular I'd really like to get rid of, and I just did. Oh, it was beautiful too. Nice flake scar just popped off right there. Could have gone just a skosh further. I would have been happier with that, but not bad. Nice one. Alright, so now at this point I would say we got maybe one more, but I might actually be able to get it with pressure. So give me 1 second here. And then I want to show you the difference. And then if you want to rewind the video and go back and see how much thicker it was, that we basically just took a layer off of it. Now is where I might go ahead and grab with pressure and finish that last little bit off right there. There we go. It was almost too small at that point to hit with indirect too. Anyway, okay, if you want to go back and look and see how thick it was compared to now we're pretty darn thin. So all we did was, especially on this side right here, you can see all those flake scars. I mean, we ran those things all the way to center from both sides. So we really thinned and flattened that side out. This side could stand to have a little bit more here. You can see it's maybe just a skosh rounded and thick, but it's actually fine. I'll clean that up with the pressure flaker. That's that last little bit, and then we'll have a really, really thin and nice hunting point as soon as we notch it and sharpen it. All right, folks, I hope that really helped you out and better understand indirect percussion, using the big end for the big work and then the little end for all that little fine work, and you can get some really nice flakes, really safe, much safer than trying to direct percussion everything. This right here will up your napping game significantly once you figure it out. Sometimes there's a learning curve. Some folks pick it up and they get it immediately. Funny enough, as soon as I started doing this, it took me maybe an hour, and I was like, oh, it clicked, and then I got it, and then I was off and running, and have been running ever since. Some folks try this for weeks and they still don't really get it, but that's really what this video is about. It's about teaching you the things about the angles and how hard to hit it, and setting up those platforms, which your platforms don't have to be perfect with this, but of course the better your platforms are, the longer those flakes are going to travel, and actually the lighter that you have to hit this thing. So anyway, I hope that this really helps you out a lot, and again, if you need anything tool wise or rock wise or whatever, just remember right there, huntprimitive.com.